Hello, my name is Ryan, and you are listening to this special episode of the Command Point Podcast. In this episode, Shane and I were able to catch up with William Blood, who won the Super Magfest Kill Team tournament running a Renegade Chapter Heretic Astartes. In this interview, we talk about his command roster and the strategies and tactics he employed as he walked us through each of his 4 tournament matches round by round. This interview is a Kill Team masterclass, and what Will tells us is a must listen for any competitive Kill Team player. Click the link in the show notes to see Will's command roster, and without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, and we are back here with Will Blood.
Howdy.
Thanks for coming on the podcast and doing this interview with us.
Glad to be here. Anything I could do really to kind of build the community, that's always my goal.
Yeah, we appreciate that mindset. So for listeners, I don't know if we mentioned before, Will is he was the winner of the Super Magfest tournament in Maryland. He took Heretic Astartes, and we have plenty of questions for you about how everything went and what your thought process was going into it. And Ryan, did you want to kick us off here?
So I guess before we start going into your command roster and all that other jazz, what first got you into Kill Team, and how long have you been playing Kill Team for?
I have long played 40K, years and years now. I think, oh goodness, it's almost like 15. I moved to Maryland, and I don't know if you've ever been down to the DMV area, but it's really competitive when it comes to 40K. Like GW used to have their HQ out here, and so I think just as a leftover from that, everybody who plays 40K they're out for blood.
Yeah.
And I moved here right at the beginning of 8th edition. I played Gene Stealer Cult at the time.
Mm-hmm.
They were awful. And I had, I think, like 3 or 4 back-to-back games where I just got trounced. And so I took a break just kind of from everything 40K for a couple months, maybe almost 8. And that was about the time that Games Workshop started teasing Kill Team. And I had all these models lying around, that I hadn't really been doing much with. Kind of followed it. The rules came out. It seemed pretty cool. I didn't really know anybody to play it with, though, so a local store that I go to now, they posted a thing that said that they were going to start doing Kill Team Tuesdays, just a dedicated night for it at the store, and I went up and checked it out, and there were actually a surprising number of people. I was really pleased to see that there was such a big presence for it, and everything kind of just took off from there. We've managed to keep a pretty sizable group that plays out of store here in Maryland, and we've started bouncing around to the various events that we can, and I mean, that's really it.
Really cool. Our local store also has Kill Team Tuesdays. I think that's just a thing.
They have
not Kill Team specifically, but like tabletop Tuesdays. Will Blood's Renegade Chapter Heretic Astartes list included an Aspiring Champion, 4 Chaos Space Marine Gunners, a Berserker Champion, 4 Khorne Berserkers, a Cultist Champion, 4 Chaos Cultist Gunners, and 5 regular Cultists.
Yeah, it's kind of blocked into... I run it in this idea that there are 3 Chaos Space Marines typically in the list.
Okay.
Being the gunners that you can take, and then a handful of berserkers, typically somewhere between 3 and 5, and then I fill out whatever points or less with cultists, so that the roster is full up of the things to make the variations of it.
Okay, cool. I have to ask before we get into the tournament, how'd you pick Heretic? Like, how did you get into that for Kill Team, like competitively?
Well, his last name is Blood, but that's my suspicion. I don't know.
It's no small part. Strangely enough, it kind of goes back to my 40K background. The very first army that I built ever was I happened to get a Chaos Space Marine Battle Force way back when, and I built it. I put it together. I had no idea what you see is what you get really meant. So at the time, I thought that if I wanted to have, a bolt pistol, grenades, and all that, you had to have it all on the model.
Oh, okay.
And so my first box of Marines, they looked god awful. I put all kinds of bolt guns on it. Like every guy had a chainsword, a bolt pistol, a bolt gun, 2 crack grenades and frag grenades. They were a mess. And I gave them every upgrade you could give them. So they were like, ludicrously overpointed. And,
Yeah.
So I had them for a long time. I ended up getting rid of them though because they were almost unplayable. And since then, I've kind of played a whole bunch of different factions. But Kill Team came around. When it first came out, I didn't even play Heretic Astartes because as much as I like them and as much as I bet the models, they weren't really good when the game first came out.
Yeah.
The Chaos Space Marine, just by himself, you're only looking at the 2 special weapons that they could bring, which was the Heavy Bolter at the time, and then your choice of Plasma Gun or Flamer, and I guess a Melta Gun too. And I just could not build a list that didn't just die to morale.
Yeah.
Churn 2 typically.
Heretic had its issues when the game came out, like especially before the sub-factions and before the Berserkers came in.
The sub-factions and Berserkers are really what pushed me to even consider them. I don't remember I saw something about Berserkers. I think it's just I read Blood for the Blood God. I was
yeah.
Like, oh my goodness.
Oh, they got my name in here. This must be it for me.
How
perfect.
Incredible. And there was a guy at our local shop who had Chaos Space Marines. He was playing them as Iron Warriors, and I watched him play it, and I was like, oh, yeah, they've got some neat things now. So I went and I dug into the list a little bit and read through everything, and it's gone through a lot of iterations to kind of get where it was now. At the time, we were prepping pretty hard for Nova at the store. We had all decided back in February of last year that we really wanted to go to Nova. It's pretty close to where we are. They were supposed to have a pretty big Kill Team event, and we thought, hey, this is a great chance for us to, we've all been playing the game for pretty much since its release. Let's go do this big competitive thing. We'd hosted like local RTTs at the store and such, but that was a chance to kind of really go out and play against a bigger pool and people who we don't really play against very often. That's a big part of it too. I was going to bring someone else to Nova. Either I considered Astartes for a while because of Death Denied, because it's just
Yep.
I had found a couple ways. Originally, they were going to be arena only at Nova, and I thought Death Denied was incredible in arena because you could just walk into a hallway, stand there, and then be unkillable, and you could just cut somebody out of half of the game.
Yeah.
Without even rolling any dice.
While we're talking about it, I was going to ask you. You went to Nova, and I was going to ask what happened. Like, how was that tournament for you? Like, I don't remember how you placed. I know I saw it on
4th.
Okay. Yeah, I thought you had a good placing there. So what happened at Nova, I guess, before we get into all the MagFest talk?
So Nova was a really interesting event, I think, because the TO there tried some things that I think are really good for the competitive nature of the game, but also were really hard to implement in a tournament setting. They had this system where day 1 you played 3 games, and that seeded you into, I believe, 4 brackets. So they called them pods.
Yeah.
One of them had 8 people in it, and the idea was that you would have the top 8 players basically play a mini tournament out, and then behind them would be the 9 through 16 mini tournament out.
The GT.
Yeah, and the thing that was really interesting about it, though, from like a competitive play standpoint, actually, was those second day matches. You played a best of 3 series. So I played 9 games against 3 really, really good players.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about that was that it took a little bit of the randomness out of the game. because Kill Team could be really swingy. I'm sure, as you guys know,
of
and
course.
anyone listening to the podcast would probably know. Like, you get a round where somebody really slams you with the dice and you lose 2 or 3 guys. It could be basically over at that point in time, and there's not a lot you can do to stop that.
Oh, absolutely. I think the idea of a best of 3, it's the ideal for competitive, but
I completely agree.
It's just harder.
It sounds so exhausting.
It's just more impractical for Kill Team, because I mean, a lot of like esports and stuff, you see best of 3 is like the standard.
Yeah.
Like from like a philosophy point, it totally made sense. Like, I was 100% on board with it when I read the packet and I saw that the TO had done it. But sitting down and playing 12 games in 2 days was like, I literally felt fried by the end of it.
Yeah.
Especially
I bet.
on day 2, it was so going into the tournament of 8, basically, I won my first match. So then my second match, I was going up against, I think his name's Alex Torbert. Torbert.
He actually might be our next guest on the podcast. So
he's a really exceptional player.
Yeah.
And he was playing so we were at 100 points in Nova.
He was Orcs, right?
He played the Orcs. It was the Orcs spam list, and I actually ran a pretty similar list at Nova to what I ran at MagFest. 100 points though, so I had a few less tools. We played Arena for all 3 of the games that we played though, which favored his Orcs pretty heavily.
Of course, yeah.
So it was a real uphill battle because I was just getting bogged down in hallways. Even with the Berserkers going off and killing several guys as a churn, it was just hard to wade through it. And Nova was just hold 1, hold more.
Yeah, no kill.
Hold 1, hold 2, hold more.
Yeah.
And that made it so game 1 he won, game 2 I won, game 3 he won. So it was real back and forth, and it was really, really close, but it was really stressful.
Oh, I bet, yeah.
So that match alone, I was already kind of, like, it really hit the nerves racked up. And then I played against, I'm going to forget his name. He is known as a Necron player.
Chuck Yee, was it?
Yes, that's it. Chuck Yee.
Yeah, and he took Tyranids.
He took Nids, and and so we'll actually talk about my anti-Nid plans, but Nids are the hardest matchup for my Heretic Astartes.
Yeah.
They have all the things that they need to be a pain in the Heretic Astartes side. So I played against him, and we rolled basically hammer and anvil. We deployed on the short edges and had 20 some odd inches between us. So, he was able to just shoot me with a venom cannon for most of the game. And at that point in time, we only had the heavy bolter for Chaos Space Marine, so I had nothing to fight warriors with. But Nova was a ton of fun. The TO ran a really great event. I really hope that they do it again this year. If they do, I'm going to go to it again. And
I'm sure they will. Yeah.
I hope we get a lot more players out to it.
Yeah.
So when choosing your Heretic Astartes subfaction, what made you choose the Renegade chapter over Iron Warriors or like World Eaters?
It comes down to something I think anybody can arrive at if they really think about the core mechanics of the game. So, Kill Team, as opposed to 40K, the game that I came from originally, Kill Team have a really limited pool of command points. You only get 2 if your leader is still alive. So re-rolls in a given round are really limited. Anytime I can build a re-roll into my list, I'm going to do it. All the Iron Warriors does is gives you that 16% increased chance to take somebody out. But you still have to get to that point where you're doing that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm running a pretty melee-heavy team, so the re-rolls is definitely helpful on that for charging. But even when I look at other versions of the team, where I think about going shootier or something, I just can't ever see those lists being as consistent. A Berserker in melee is hitting on 3s. Any ranged guy that you have, unless you're buffing him a lot, he's hitting on like 4s, 5s sometimes.
Yep.
Berserkers are just more accurate with less help. Like, I can count on a Berserker by himself doing more than a gunner is going to do by himself. And when I design a list, I want everything to be really efficient by itself at what it does. So I'm not necessarily looking for a Berserker to kill somebody. I think looking for kills in Kill Team is kind of a fool's errand.
Ironic.
It is.
Yeah.
With the mechanic being that when you take somebody down to 0 wounds, they only get taken out of action on a 4+. That's really out of your control a lot of the time. You know, like, you can put a CP into it, but even with a reroll, you know, like, you need a lot of things to go your way to take somebody out of action. So what I look to do more in everything in my list is to just make it so that I have good positioning power, and the Renegade chapter does that better than any other chapter. Look at Kraken for Tyranids. There's a reason you see people take it a lot. It's for the same reason. It's because it gives you that power to be able to maneuver around the board in a way that you want to. The movement phase is almost everything in Kill Team to me. So every single game that I play, I use that Renegade chapter for a reroll probably 4 or 5 times. I just don't think you're going to get that same benefit out of any other sub-faction for Chaos Space Marines.
Yeah, I see that for sure with the Berserkers too. Like, it's so dependent on getting in, and I know the way you run them, I mean, you don't have any ranged weapons on these Berserkers, so if they're not getting into combat, they're not doing anything really.
Yeah. You know, when I talk about the list a little bit, you know, maybe it plays a lot into my play style. I play the game really aggressively. Like, I try and just shock my opponent most of the time. Like, normally they're not ready for such long charges to be happening. Like, the Renegade chapter makes it so you can pretty consistently, you know, if I have 2 Berserkers charging you from 9 inches away, one of them will probably make it. And that's all it takes. Once I've got one guy in there locking down a portion of the board, now my opponent typically has to deal with that Berserker who made it into the lines, and that gives me a lot more time to maneuver around my cultists who are scoring points, or even my gunners. You know, like, although I'm not a shooty list, my list is about 50-50 in where I look to do stuff. You know, I tend to try and get some long-range kills. I tend to try and get some kills with cultists with special weapons, or even las gunfire. And what the Berserkers are such a threat, people have to deal with them, and the Renegade chapter just makes them that much more of a threat.
Okay, so speaking more about your gunners and your range shooting for this list, how did the autocannon and the missile launcher gunner specifically work out for you, because they're new with the Kill Team manual?
So in practice matches, I had a lot better success with them. But I'm not really looking for them to really be doing a lot of heavy lifting in the list. I think, in fact, in the entire tournament, I think the autocannon killed nothing. Yeah, in fact, I didn't even take it. Now that I think about it, yeah, I didn't take it. It was on the roster, but just the opponents I went up against, like, the autocannon wasn't the ideal one. I took the missile launcher twice.
Okay.
And I think it shot a Hormigaunt once, and that Hormigaunt died.
Of course.
but that was it.
I would hope so.
I would expect nothing less.
So, but that said, the missile launcher did exactly what it was supposed to, which is I actually used the heavy weapons in the Marine list again for that board state control. So the missile launcher, because it is a big threat to 3+ wound models, I can use it by saving it as typically my last drop to determine where the thing that it would be best suited at hitting goes. And that's actually a really important thing to protecting my Berserkers, to protecting, whatever it is I decide. In the format that we were playing, Survivor was one of the secondaries that came up several times. And that one, you nominate a model in your team after you deploy, and if it's alive and outside of your deployment zone at the end of the game, you get 3 victory points, which is huge. I could dictate where the threats to my survivor were with that missile launcher. I could dictate where they were going to be able to fire whatever weapon that was. Prime example, in the last match that I played against a Tyranids player. He had a Venom Cannon. Venom Cannon is really effective at taking out Marines, my Berserkers in particular. So I grouped most of my Berserkers on one side of the field and then put the missile launcher there so he would move it to the other side. And that prevented him from being able to fire at any of my Berserkers but one. And, if they go unchecked, they're going to do a lot of damage. And so that's kind of what I look to the heavy weapon to do, is just to be a threat. He doesn't actually have to kill anything as long as he scares my opponent, or as long as my opponent respects him.
Okay. I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. I think that's a pretty smart way of organizing, I guess, in deployment. I think that's something that a lot of players don't really take into account when they're setting up. And I'm assuming that on these lists throughout the tournament, you were probably always taking most, if not all, of those Berserkers.
Yeah, actually, I took 5 Berserkers every single match.
Okay.
So real convenient. Like, it was real simple, actually. The roster the muster rather, that I ended up running. It was just all 5 Berserkers plus a heavy weapon in the form of the missile launcher or the Flamer veteran. So I didn't take either the autocannon or the plasma gun. Both the classic, Heretic Astartes weapons. I didn't field either of them the entire tournament.
Okay.
But that was partly because of the matchups that I had.
Yeah. I mean, the missile launcher against Tyranids makes so much sense because you're going up against like a Lictor or a Warrior and you need to get that off the board.
Yeah. Even if he doesn't kill him, the missile launcher has about a 30% chance. Special rules, terrain, tactics, it can really adjust those percentages a lot in both ways. For example, even if he blows a Tyranid warrior up, if the Tyranid player has enough CP, they could just rapidly regenerate it. So, the math hammer on it isn't necessarily perfect, but it is such a powerful weapon that typically Tyranid players, I don't think, are really used to encountering D6 damage weapons.
Yeah, I can't imagine. It's not too common.
It's really uncommon in Kill Team. You might see a Meltagun, like a heavy Meltagunner or something like that. I've seen that in guard lists, occasionally. But like a Marine with a missile launcher is kind of uncommon. I think the only other time I've seen it is a Scout missile launcher.
Yeah.
So,
you might be able to.
Scout's a lot.
Yeah, you might be able to count on one hand how many D6 damage weapons there are in the entire book.
Yeah. Particularly at range.
Yes.
So I think that Synapse is so vitally important to Tyranids that they don't want to ever risk losing those warriors. So you can just kind of force them to either hide, in which case you can now charge them with my Berserkers, without taking Overwatch from a Venom Cannon, from a Devourer, from Flash Hooks, from all those weapons they have.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can just dictate their deployment and try and deny them some portion of the battlefield, which is what I put it in there for. Originally, I had thought about keeping a Heavy Bolter in the list. Right after Annual came out, I did a lot of soul searching on the heavy weapons in a sense. But I've come up that I think the autocannon and missile launcher is the way to go. They both are the answer to the 2 extremes of things that are a problem for the list, which is a lot of small things. Like if you have a bunch of Poxwalkers or a whole lot of Gaunts, those things that are just like Orc Boys, that's a great example. Just a big cloud of Orc Boys. Autocannon is going to do a ton of work on it. On the opposite side of that, though, 3+ wound models are a huge problem for the Chaos Space Marine. You don't have anything that really hurts 3+ wound models well, except for the missile launcher. And it's not going to do it every time, but it has the chance to, roll that 5 damage and just blow one of those 3 wood models off the table.
Yeah, it's a big enough threat that, like you said, just the act of putting it down is enough of a deterrent to put those high wound count models wherever you want them to be, as opposed to where you want your opponent, where the opponent wants to put them. Yeah.
Right. And then, typically what that lets me do then, well, maybe the best thing to do is, I don't know, would it be useful to, I guess, to talk about the games?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I was going to ask you.
Yeah. We were just waiting for a good time to ask you, but I guess now's a good time as any.
Round 1, I played against Death Guard.
And wait, before you get into this, there were 3 games, right?
4.
4. Okay. All right. So continue.
So round 1, I played against Death Guard. The guy had said he hadn't really played too many games, but he was an exceptional player nonetheless. It was a very close match. I think I won it by 2 points. He was running kind of an off-color Death Guard team. It had a lot of things that I don't regularly run into on Death Guard. I'm used to kind of seeing a double blight launcher with plasma guns on like the leader or something kind of like that mixed in. He had, after we mustered, I don't remember what was on his command roster, he had 2 combat light marines, one with a cleaver, one with a flail. He had 2 blight launchers, and then he had a combi plasma leader with a power fist. And then he also had a regular bolt gun marine, which I've never seen. And then he had however many poxwalkers fill that out.
Yeah.
We played on arena. This is kind of a quirk of the tournament. In the end, I ended up playing all my matches on arena, which was really helpful against. It was really helpful against Death Guard, really helpful against my match 2, which happened to be Custodes, but really bad against Gene Stealer Cult and Tyranids. I really wanted to play on open against them both, and I had to go into arena both times.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll try to talk about why. We used the Slaughterfest secondaries, but we're in arena. That first match, we played on the name of it escapes me. There's an arena board where there is a hallway that is open in the middle. There's no doors or anything that block it.
Yeah, I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah, I don't know the name of it either, but yeah.
We played the deployment where you're not on opposite sides of that hallway. You're like on the short ends of the board, and there's doors between you.
Okay.
I won initiative, and I just ran right up onto his doors with, on one side, just a cultist, and on the other side with a berserker. Just the intent there to just kind of force him to have to deal with them.
Yeah.
Both models, I believe, died. But I kind of stalled him in there, and that made it so that I was able to just kind of, for the rest of the game, feed in berserkers one at a time on both flanks. He did, though. My berserker champion that I have, who's a zealot, has always been like my most consistent killing model. When I went to Nova, in fact, tallied up across all the games that I played, he took out of action 25 models.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
Like, he's just a monster. He's so consistent because he gets all the attacks for being a zealot. He's strength 6. He re-rolls the wounds with his lightning claw. You can throw the zealot tactic on him for 1 CP. Normally, you never do it, but he has so many attacks because he fights twice. He can actually take advantage of it, which it basically just gives him Death to the False Emperor against everything. On 6s, he gets an extra attack. And he'll just, like, if there's 2 units who are together, or 2 models who are together, he will just kill them both.
Yeah.
Every time.
Yeah. One of my questions that I had for you actually was which of the models on your roster was your MVP for this tournament? I'm assuming it was this fine gentleman here.
It was not actually.
Oh.
The MVP, strangely enough, it's tough to give it to a single model because they're almost interchangeable to me, but it was just the regular old cultist. And
Oh.
it will come up. It'll come up in the later matches. They didn't matter so much in this first one. This first one, maybe that's what I'll do. I'll talk about the MVP in each of them.
Okay.
So this first one, the big deal really came down to right before the tournament, I put into my list the veteran flamer. I thought a lot about every time I've ever used the veteran tactic. And several times I had taken a veteran berserker and vetted him up the field, charged turn 1 to try and tie somebody up. But every time that happens, he either kills what he was hitting, and then he's just kind of in the enemy ranks, and they can decisive move charge in, and I have the decisive move counter, and we roll off, and we're both down a CP. Or he doesn't kill what he's hit, and then they fall back, and he's just dead in the water, more or less. He's like a 16, 17-point model, depending on what I put on him. And a lot of times I was just throwing him out there. For another while, I took a veteran Terminator with Lightning Claws because he's pretty durable. You can vet move, which kind of counters his slow speed, but throw him up into the ranks, just have him kind of run amok, more or less. But it was kind of a similar issue that he'd run into. He either killed what he was supposed to and then was just kind of there without any support, or he didn't kill it and then they fell back and he doesn't even have a gun, so he can literally do nothing. I thought about that. The other use of it is, of course, to open a door in arena. And if I'm opening a door with a berserker, he's not going to do anything on that turn. He's going to vet move, open the door. Now he's at the front of my pack. And so I'm going to have to advance him out to let everyone else behind him, something like that. He's not going to do anything useful. And then I thought, in all these cases, a flamer does what I want it to do better than a berserker does. In arena, I have him go up, he opens the door, and now he can advance out on his first turn. So he's going to get way ahead of the pack, which gives me a lot of freedom to move my guys out from behind him. He can go off and then just kind of be a harrying unit, harass one side of the field. The Flamer is really effective against all of those chaff units that people like to take. Cultists in Chaos lists, grots and orcs. The things that people are grabbing Scout the Field with, that they're grabbing those zone control points. The Flamer is really exceptional at going off and grabbing them. And against very certain matchups, they don't really have anything to take care of a Chaos Space Marine, like a full 1 in power armor, at range.
Mm-hmm.
The Death Guard are a great example of that. So in this match, I took the veteran Flamer because I thought he's going to be great at harassing Poxwalkers, because Poxwalkers have a real morale issue. If you space them apart. So the only way to counter that is to space them together. And once you put them together, they're very flammable.
Yes, they are. They're what do they have, like they're tough. I mean, they're super weak. They're like 3-point models. They die. Yeah. You look at them and they die.
They're 4 points, I believe. They have toughness 3. They
Yeah.
have no armor save, but they have a 5 of feel no pain.
Yeah.
And I think their morale or their leadership is like a 4. It's very, very low.
Yeah.
So even if you put a flesh wound on them, you can really quickly just cause them to be shaken.
Yeah.
And against Death Guard, I often find, really against everybody I play against, except mids, I often find the best strategy is just to focus on breaking them as early as you can.
Yeah.
Because then their models are no longer consistently useful for them. So in this case, I took the Flamer to just be a threat against those Poxwalkers. I vet move him, open the door, and then turn 1, I got initiative, so I advanced him out to the middle of the board. He had control of the objective, and there was really nothing my opponent could do to contest that. Because if they moved out the Poxwalkers to be in a position to move towards that center, I had a Flamer ready to just torch him. He's also Marcos Lanesh, which is a really big boon now, because now you can double shot that flamethrower. So you can, after moving him out on turn 1, setting up for turn 2, you can start turn 2, ready him, and then now if a threat has moved in to contest wherever he's moved to control the field, if someone's in line of sight or multiple units are in line of sight, you ready? You fire in the ready round, and then you use Endless Cacophony with Marcus Lanash to fire again at the start of the fire at will phase, assuming that you won initiative. So you can just double tap right away before anybody who had moved to contest you was able to do anything about it. So I got a lot of use out of the Flamer in every game that I took him. And it's not as flashy as the Plasma Gun, but it's better at dealing with the really annoying things in the game.
Those toughness 3, bad saves. Excuse the noise. Sorry about that.
No, you're fine. Tau drones are a really great example too, actually. I put them in the list kind of with them in mind as well. If someone is in range for Savior protocols, they're also in range for me to torch both units. So he's really effective at harassing Tau castles if they've built up in a way like that.
Yeah, that's a good way to think. I haven't really considered that with Savior protocols and auto hitting.
A standard Marine is also pretty durable against most Tau weapons, barring their gunners. If you have a Pathfinder with a rail rifle, that will tear a Marine up. But
Can confirm.
Just a regular old gun drone, it kind of has a tough time getting through a 3-up armor save, especially if you save a reroll to tank it if you need to.
Yeah.
So that's why he was in there. In this game, I took him, and he was really helpful. He gained me control of the center of the board, and I held it for the entire match. My Zealot, though, my really beloved model, he charged into the enemy's Aspiring Champion and died the Nurgling infestation, which has never happened to me.
Oh. So this is this the one where he comes back as a Poxwalker?
No.
Okay.
It's if you fight the enemy leader, it's 2 CP, so it's really costly, and on a 4+, the enemy model suffers a mortal wound. So I charged him, and it happens at the end of the movement phase. So at the end of the movement phase, he paid 2 CP, he got that 4 for the mortal wound, and then he got the 4 to take me out of action. So I lost my Zealot without him even getting the swing. So,
oh my gosh.
That's unfortunate.
Which early on had me kind of worried, because that side that my Zealot was on, it was the left half of the board. I had put Zealot and my Combat Berserker over there. That's also the same door that my Flamer vet had come out of. And so I only had 3 Marines over there with 2 cultists supporting them. And he had a lot of models. I think he had 3 Plague Marines and maybe 2 Boxwalkers. So I was really low on that flank now. And it was a little worrisome, because if that collapsed, he would have been able to come around to the center. And my Flamer is really good against Poxwalkers, but it's really bad against Plague Marines. So it would have been ideal.
Yeah.
On the other side, though, things went really well for me, basically right from the beginning. I locked him in with a cultist. He had to take a lot of time dealing with it. By the time it was gone, I was able to get in 2 Berserkers, hold him back. The Berserkers, they didn't really kill anything, but they were just tying up all of his guns basically the whole game. So I controlled my 2 objectives and the center objective the entire game. And by the end of it, I actually controlled 4 of the objectives because I had collapsed his right flank. On the left, really the big boon was that, and this is why I don't take a Power Fist, on the 3rd turn, his Power Fist was fighting my Combat Berserker, and it missed. Because, -1.
Yeah.
So that's the main reason that I just don't ever consider taking him, because that reduction in accuracy just really, really hurts. So that Berserker lived an extra round, which just stymied his movement, and so he wasn't ever able to really get out. Basically, every turn, he got kill more every time. We both got kill 1, I think, every round. So it was the idea behind the kill 1, kill more, I think, was that those elite armies with heavier models would be able to take advantage of it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. We've talked a lot about that very topic.
So at least in practice, and I haven't played it a few times, I've actually found a pretty easy way to get around it, which is just barring an army like Custodes, where they've only got 3 models and you're probably never going to get it.
Yep.
You just kill something else and accept that you're not going to get killed more, and then just find a way to get around the 3-point deficit that you're going to end up at. So in that match, and in every match actually where I played against an army who was pretty hefty, who could really survive my attacks, I just tried to deny them as many points as possible. So I tried to look at the 6 things that we had and be predictive about what he would have selected.
Okay.
In the first match, I happened to have the objectives that we had for the first 2 games. I didn't write them down for the later ones. But in that first one, our options were cut off the head, engage on all fronts, high-profile targets, mind games, proximity alert, and holding, which holding is just have an objective the entire game. I assumed because he is really, really, really durable that he took holding, and then because my list had a lot of berserkers on it, I assumed that he also had proximity alert. His last one was kind of a toss-up for me, but I thought he probably picked high-profile targets because that's a really, really common one.
Yeah.
Normally, if you're going to be trying to kill something, you're going to be trying to kill the enemy specialists anyways. So I thought out of those ones, I can kind of deny him high-profile targets. It's a little bit of a gamble, though, because those are also my big hitting tools in the list.
Yeah, like your Zealot, RIP.
Right, exactly. So as soon as he died, he did reveal that he did have high-profile targets.
Yeah.
So, which did also, then I kept my veteran away from his forces for the entire rest of the game to just make sure he never got that point. But I knew I couldn't deny him holding because he's just very likely going to be able to control a point the entire game. He's Death Guard. If he parks 3 Plague Marines on it, I don't think I'm really going to be able to shift him.
Okay.
Proximity alert, though, I had a lot of control over it. It's very reasonable that I could make it so that if he was in a position to gain proximity alert, I could either just, when killing my model came up, not re-roll to allow him to die, things like that. And a couple times that came up where I was in a position to prevent him from being able to get proximity alert. And, and every time I did that were points lost in a round. Just in a matchup between my Chaos Space Marines and Death Guard, I just can't rely on anything in my list to really kill Death Guard because they have 2 chances to save against an attack.
Right.
They've got a 3-up armor, already really good.
Mm-hmm.
They've got a 5-up toughness. That's reducing my chance to wound them in most cases. And then they've got a 5-up feel no pain.
Yeah.
So, just all of this is kind of stacked to give them a lot of opportunities to prevent damage coming through. And I saw that in the match. I expected it to happen. It did happen. I charged Berserkers into Marines. I expect to kill something normally with a Berserker, but you just can't against Plague Marines. So, in the end, I don't even know that I killed 2 of his Plague Marines. Both of his combat guys. I killed a guy with the cleaver and a guy with the flail, but I couldn't kill any of the other ones, and he had 5 of them.
One thing I wanted to ask, I'm assuming because you've expressed that you like to save your command points and you value them pretty highly. I'm just going to go ahead and assume that you are not a heretic player that uses Beseech the Gods.
No.
Yeah, I didn't think so. I know a lot of people have moved away from it. For the listeners, that's the one where you pick a model before the start of the first round. You roll a dice, and on a 1, he basically takes D3 mortal wounds.
He explodes. All over the walls.
And anything other than a 1, he's +1 to hit, +1 to wound for the whole game. But it's just very risky, and you use all your CP round 1 before everything even starts.
Back when we only had the heavy bolter, that's the only time I ever considered it.
Right.
Because it was about the only way that you could get the heavy bolter to do something.
To stack up.
Yeah. Now, though, that the autocannon is just better in every way, I don't even consider it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just too much at the beginning of the game. CP, for me, I really only ever use it for like 4 things. Maybe 5. I use it really consistently for veteran move, because the veteran move gives you a lot of control before the beginning of the game. Before even that first initiative roll I use decisive move all the time, probably every other round. If not 3 out of 4 rounds in a match. Like, decisive move is just huge for an assault list, because it's what lets you always get that charge off with an important model before your opponent can run away from you.
Mm-hmm.
I use it for rerolls a lot, typically for injury rolls. I really save it for that. I very, very rarely reroll a hit or a wound unless it's like, the chips are down and I need this to go through in order to win the game. If it's early in the phase, I'll just save it, pocket it, for an opportunity to reroll an injury that comes through later. Because, oftentimes I'll open up with the big stuff, like I'll start off with the autocannon, the plasma gun, the berserker zealot, whatever the heavy hitter is, because they're ready or because I charged with them. But once it gets around to it, there's always cultists somewhere on the field, and they've always got a las gunshot or two to pop up. And oftentimes those find the weird, nicks in the armor on a random marine, and then rerolling that one injury roll. When the cultist takes out the 20-point model, it shifts things pretty heavily.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's a big momentum. That's basically as high value, like return you're going to get on
investment. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other two things that I really save it for now, always it's been for Fury of Khorne, which just lets me fight a second time or a third time in the case of the Berserker with a Mark of Khorne model. And then newly, the Endless Cacophony Fire Twice Marcus Lanash tactic.
Ah, okay. So, yeah, one of my questions was, like, I was looking at your list and you had like all sorts of different, like all your gunners were Slaanesh, all the berserkers are Khorne, obviously. So now that makes sense.
There are 4 new tactics, and they all require a mark.
Okay.
I guess 3 new. The Fury of Khorne one is in the core book, but the 3 new ones: Endless Cacophony lets you fire a second time with a Slaanesh marked unit. The Mark of Tzeentch gives a 5-up invulnerability save to a model, and then the Mark of Nurgle adds 1 toughness to a model for a round.
Okay. I actually was not aware of the new tactics on Heretics. I just haven't really looked at Heretic in the annual outside of the new weapons, so that's good to know.
There's a couple new tactics in there. There's some pretty cool ones, but they are kind of tough to use. Aside from those marked ones, there's other ones where it's like, I think there's a 2 CP one where you pick an objective and you get to reroll 1s to wound against any enemy models that are within 3 inches of that objective.
Oh,
which could be helpful.
Yeah, I mean that could swing a match. That's like a round 4 thing in my mind.
I think it's if someone has a bunch of models on one point where you're going to get a really big return on investment for it, it seems useful. In most cases, though, people only have like 2 models holding an objective, and I think I'd probably just rather spend 1 CP for a reroll to wound if I needed it. Rerolling 1s on like the 4 attacks you might make against those models in a turn doesn't really seem more as 2 CP.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, that was basically the match against the Death Guard. I just kind of locked him into the board and just slowed him down so much that he could never really get out. And Death Guard are already slow.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
It's pretty easy to do. Something that is really interesting, though, if you take a look at the standings for MagFest, the Death Guard falls squarely in the middle of the rankings. 3 out of the 4 players are dead center.
Yeah. We talked to Matt on Tuesday, and he mentioned that Death Guard made up the most factions taken of at the tournament. There were more Death Guard players, I guess, rather than any other faction individually.
Yeah. They definitely outnumbered everybody. I thought it was really interesting that it seems like they were really apparently the gatekeeper. That you had to have an answer to them if you wanted to get into the top half of the rankings.
Yeah, I mean, finishing right in the middle, yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so the match against the Death Guard just kind of came down to that zone control. So We took a lunch break after that, so I had a lot of time to think about who I was going to play next. And when the pairings came up, it was pretty funny. Round one, I sat next to the table where Janice was playing Custodes.
Mm-hmm.
And she decimated her opponent. Like, it was one of those games where the person on the receiving end was like, oof, why did I come?
Yeah.
And so they were talking about Custodes, and she was like, yeah, they're really, really strong. I have a really hard time beating them. That's why I brought them to the tournament. So after our match was over, I talked to her a bit about it, and I said, I've never lost to Custodes.
Oh.
To which she was like, oh, really? Never? And I was like, yeah, I've never lost to him. I always either kill one, and then they're just down so much that they can't fight back, or I just outscore them on something.
Yeah, it's weird because I wouldn't have possibly considered Custodes to be good until kill one, kill more became a thing.
Yeah. So we go away to lunch. Rankings come up, and I'm playing against Janice and her Custodes.
I was actually going to ask if you played Janice or any of the other. There was a few high-ranked players on ITC.
Yeah. I played 3 of them.
Wow. So that's about as legitimate of a tournament win as you're going to get.
Yeah.
My next 3 matches are all against really good, really exceptional players. So we go into round 2 against Janice. It's Arena again. Like I said, I got it all 4 times.
Yeah.
Which it's good against Custodes, because Arena against Custodes is a good matchup. Although I put the missile launcher in there in part for Custodes on open. Firing that missile launcher twice really gives you a lot of power against Custodes. Even if they got a storm shield, if you are firing that thing 4 times in the first 2 rounds, there's a decent chance that you punch through and knock a Custodes out.
Just one time.
And as soon as one of them are down, they've just lost the potential to get control point.
Can I make one before you actually describe what happened in this match? Can I make one quick prediction, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong?
Sure.
You mentioned that the cultist ends up being your MVP.
Oh God.
Is there a cultist in this game that
Does he
survives?
hold the door closed for like all 4 turns?
It's so much better. It is a cultist. And it has to do with the Markazine.
Okay.
So, match against Janice. We play, I think it's called Armorium.
Yeah.
The Armorium for Catacombs. It's the one where there's a little square room in the middle.
Yep.
I think that's Catacombs, yeah.
Yeah, I know which one.
So we are on opposite sides of the room in the kind of really long deployment.
Yeah.
Okay.
I take the missile launcher in this match, even though it is Arena, because I know she's going to put a Custodes on that door on the opposite side of the square room because she has to. So I take the missile launcher because I'm going to open the door and I'm going to have him have line of sight down that hallway the entire match.
Right.
Which is going to make it so that she can't stand and fire. He's going to have to engage me in combat. And that's an important bit because I can feed her one guy at a time in combat. In shooting, I have to worry a lot about placement. I don't want to be hit twice with Custodes. They're really, really accurate. So they can pretty easily kill 2 guys with gunfire.
Mm-hmm.
Her roster has all the variations of Custodes available. I thought she was going to take Guardian Spear Custodes because I personally think that they're the best.
Yeah.
I think the Storm Shield is only good in very specific matchups, but my list has at most AP -1 on most things. The Lightning Claw is -2. If I took the missile launcher, it's -2. But everything else is -1. Chain axes. I could take a plasma gun, so maybe her thought was that I'd take the plasma gun. But plasma gun are actually really mathematically bad against Custodes. Like, you will very rarely, if ever, kill a Custodes with a plasma gun. So I didn't even consider taking it. So I this match, I take the 5 Berserkers again. I take the Cultist Champion as my leader. Take the missile launcher, and then I think I have 2 Plain Cultists and 2 Heavy Stumper Cultists, and that's the roster. I set that missile launcher up dead center just to provide fire down the hallway, and then I scattered, the cultists kind of threw out, and I put all the berserkers right behind that door that goes into the center room. Turn 1, I win initiative. I open the door. I move up all my berserkers into that room, save for one. One of them I send to the left to go down the hallway. Everybody else goes down into the center room. I have one berserker stand in front of the door. I know she's going to open it. I know she's going to shoot it or charge it. But he's there. She's not going to be able to get into the room. And I hide all the other berserkers after advancing them in the corners of the room so that you can't draw line of sight to them.
Mm-hmm.
I send the cultists basically in their entirety down around to the left because I had Survivor on my cultist champion. So I just tucked him all the way in the back corner.
Right.
Because I knew there was no way ever these custodians were going to get all the way back there to kill that one cultist. So I could pretty much count that he was going to get Survivor. And then the other things that I took was Scout the Field and Proximity Alert. So I sent cultists kind of to the edges to try and get them set up for Scout the Field, because that's a deployment where you can do it pretty easy. You start close enough to the two side edges that you can just kind of move around to grab them. I got set up for Scout turn 1, and then I placed that Berserker right in front of the door, and then I put 2 Berserkers within 2 inches of where the Custodies would end up if it charged that Berserker behind the door. Setting myself up to get Proximity Alert even if that Berserker died, because I could almost count on the fact that she wouldn't consolidate into me, because I assumed that she wouldn't want to risk suffering any attacks from the Berserkers because they fight twice.
Yeah.
Turn 1 happens, and basically everything that I thought would happen happened. She moves one Custodian around to the back to grab an objective, and the other 2 move up. One opens the door for one guy. He charges my Berserker. My Berserker dies. Turn 1 goes by, and I have hold more, but she's got kill more.
Mm-hmm.
The next round, one of those Custodians goes around to the left, kind of down to that hallway where I have all those cultists and the one Berserker. We have kind of just a Mexican standoff here. we just stand on opposite sides of the door and no one opens it. That cultist is there just waiting. The Berserker is kind of behind him waiting, and they just wait for the door. In the middle, it just basically is a repeat of what happened last time. I think I had the decisive move this time, and she was pretty low on CP already because she spent a lot of them turn 1. I think she spent 1 for vet move, and she had 4 because you get the extra points for being below 125. She spent vet move, and then she paid 2 CP to use a tactic that let her reroll all wounds against Chaos Marines. I think because she was worried that she'd get tied up with that Berserker. So she just guaranteed that he died. So she only went into this round with 1 left over from before. And she wanted to use Decisive Strike if I charged. So she banked the CP and didn't contest my decisive move. I moved into the doorway, the exact same thing I did before, and just kind of tied that Custodies up. And this round basically played out as an exact repeat. Killed the Berserker, but I still had 2 guys within for Proximity Alert. I got Scout the Field. So I was already really racking up the points at this point in time. She was getting kill more every single turn, though, and hold 1. So even now, she's I think she's at 6, and I'm only at 4. So it was looking definitely in the Custodian's favor. Turn 3, I open the door on the left where the Custodian's behind. And I spend 1 CP on that cultist to give him a 5-up invulnerability save.
Okay.
Okay.
This is our hero?
Yeah, and he stands there and waits. On the other side, I basically do I won initiative this round, so I do exactly what I did before. I put 1 Berserker in. It happens to be my Zealot this time to fight the 2 Custodies. The reason I put the Zealot in, actually, is because I wanted her to have to save the 2 CP to Decisive Strike him. At this point in time, she was down to 2, just like I was. So I thought, I'm going to put the Zealot in because he's really scary, because he has the potential to kill her, because I know I'm going to get swing twice first because I have initiative, so she's going to spend 2 CP to kill him. which means that I can count on having no CP for the rest of the round. And that's exactly what happened. So he goes in. I still have the 2 guys in the room to be able to get proximity alert off of that custodian guard. She has to spend the 2 CP to decisive strike him. He dies. It's basically exactly the same as before. The one difference, though, she charges that cultist, and he tanks all the custodian spear attacks on his ability save. Yeah. So she missed with one, or she didn't wound with it. One of them dropped, so I had to make 2 5-ups, and he made it.
Wow.
So he lives, all according to plan.
What an absolute unit.
Yeah, exactly.
I am in awe.
So that round I get 2 for hold more, and then I get my 2 for my side points. We're going into the last round. Things are really close. So the score at this point in time would be 9-8.
Ooh.
No. 9 to. I should have a little bit more. It's 9 to 10. In my favor though. So I'm up by 1 point. After so we finished these first 3 rounds really, really quickly.
Yeah, that's the Custody special. Is you breeze through the game.
Yeah, we had, I think they gave us an hour and 10 minutes or I don't remember how long the rounds were. It's somewhere around there. We had like a half an hour left basically. So I sat down and I was like, all right, I'm going to take a little bit of time to really think about the math on this. And so what it ended up boiling down to was, as long as that one cultist lived, I win the game. If that cultist dies, the game ties. So I had a ton of CP banked because I wasn't doing anything. I think I had like 7 CP. I had some crazy amount, maybe 5. I think it was 5. I had a ton. So I spent 1 to get that cultist the Marquezine again. Give him the 5-up. He's already there in the fight.
Yeah.
He just got to live. And I got a reroll that I can use to reroll it. So I'm going to do that. I charge in a cultist in the middle into the Custodies to just tie him up. And he makes it. He charged from out of line of sight, so he didn't have to suffer any Overwatch. So he's in there now. He's going to soak up the hits. I have control of it. I just give this one guy to live, and I'll win by a point. So we go to the fight phase. She goes to hit, misses with 1 attack or fails the wound. It was basically the same thing. 2 of them went through. I rolled it. One of them was a 6. One of them, I think, was like a 3 or something. And then I spent a CP to reroll it, and he gets a 5. So he tanked both Custodies attacks again, just locking up that entire half of the board, making it so that... And that turn, she didn't even kill 1. So I ended up winning by a little bit more, but that was just luck. The counting on thing was just at Custodies.
Did you
bouncing off of cultist.
Did you mention what her secondaries were?
So she had Survivor as well.
Okay.
On her leader.
Naturally.
And then she took Mind Games, but killed everything. So I never failed a morale check. And then she also had, I think, Proximity Alert. I think she must have had Proximity Alert. She was getting some points off the secondaries, one of them, but and then Survivor, we both had it, so it just canceled out. But in the end, I won by a point.
Yeah, it sounds like the secondaries were pretty big for you, specifically the positional ones.
Yep. Yeah. Well, that's what I took every round. So there were hammering was available several, I think, in my next 2 matches, but I never took it. Basically, anytime there was a kill thing, I avoided taking it because the position ones were just easier or better to do in every case against all my opponents.
Okay, especially against Custodies. That's kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah, it was pretty obvious. So very, very close match. We were over with a ton of time now, so we just kind of sat around waiting for everyone else to finish. Goes into round 3, and I'm playing against, and his last name is pronounced nothing like it's spelled. So I'm going to pronounce his last name wrong, but if you look him up on the ITC or on BCP, it looks like it'd be pronounced this way. Matt H. but his last name's like Howell, Hoell.
Oh, yes. I do know who you're talking about. What does he play? Was he the Gene Cult player?
So he played Gene Stealer Cults this time. He is a Heretic Astartes player. I believe him at Nova, and at Nova he ran World Eaters, and we had a long conversation about